The little girl's voice trembled through the apartment complex hallway at 11:47 p.m., piercing through the silence like a desperate prayer searching for someone, anyone, who might listen. Sarah Chen pressed herself against the broken door of apartment 4B, her small fingers gripping the splintered wood frame as tears streamed down her 6-year-old cheeks, and when she saw the tall man emerging from the elevator with his briefcase and expensive suit, she didn't think about stranger danger or proper introductions. She just knew that grown-ups were supposed to fix things, and their door was very, very broken, and her mommy was scared, so scared that she'd locked herself and baby Emma in the bathroom and wouldn't come out. The man froze mid-step, his polished shoes stopping just short of his own apartment door across the hall, and for a moment that stretched like eternity, Marcus Wellington, CEO of Wellington Industries, Forbes 500 regular, man who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions before breakfast, just stared at this tiny child in princess pajamas who was looking at him like he held all the answers to problems he couldn't yet understand. If you believe that sometimes the people we need most arrive exactly when we need them, that kindness can change everything in a single moment, please hit that like button, drop a comment below about a time someone showed up for you when you needed it most, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel because we're building a community that believes in the power of human connection. Marcus had been thinking about quarterly reports and international acquisitions and the 17 emails still waiting in his inbox when he'd stepped into that elevator, exhausted from another 16-hour day at the office, wondering why success felt so hollow when he returned each night to an empty apartment filled with expensive furniture and absolute silence. He'd moved into this modest building 6 months ago after his divorce, choosing anonymity over penthouse luxury, wanting to feel human again instead of like a corporation in a tailored suit, but he'd kept to himself, nodding politely at neighbors without really seeing them, protecting his privacy like it was his most valuable asset. Now this child was seeing him, really seeing him, with eyes that held no judgment about his net worth or business acumen, only desperate hope that he might be someone who helped people when they needed help. The door to 4B hung crooked on its hinges, the lock mechanism completely shattered, wood splintered around the frame like something had been forced with tremendous violence, and Marcus felt his blood run cold as his mind rapidly assembled the pieces of what must have happened here. He knelt down slowly, making himself less imposing, his $1,000 suit pants touching the worn hallway carpet as he met Sarah's eyes at her level and asked in the gentlest voice he could manage what had happened and where her mommy was and whether she was hurt. Sarah's words tumbled out in a breathless rush. A bad man, mommy's ex-boyfriend, angry and yelling, pounding on the door until it broke, mommy screaming for Sarah to run and hide, the man searching the apartment while mommy held baby Emma in the locked bathroom, Sarah hiding in the closet behind winter coats that smelled like mothballs, the man finally leaving but the door still broken and mommy too scared to come out because what if he came back, what if he came back, what if he came back? Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed tight since his own father had walked out when he was 7, since he'd built walls around himself and decided that success and money were safer than vulnerability. And connection, since he'd forgotten what it felt like to be needed for something that actually mattered. He told Sarah very clearly that he was going to help, that she'd done exactly the right thing by asking for help, that she was very brave, and then he called 911 while walking carefully into the apartment, announcing himself clearly so the woman in the bathroom would know he wasn't the threat. The police arrived 12 minutes later, and by then Marcus had already heard the full story from Jennifer Martinez through the bathroom door, her voice shaking as she explained that Derek had been getting more controlling, more volatile, that she'd finally gotten the courage to end it 2 weeks ago, that tonight he'd shown up drunk and enraged, and she'd barely managed to get the children to safety before he'd broken through. The officers took the report, promised increased patrols, gave Jennifer information about restraining orders and domestic violence resources, but when they left at 1:30 in the morning, the door was still broken and Jennifer was still terrified and Sarah was still clinging to Marcus's hand like he was the only solid thing in a world that had proven itself dangerous and unpredictable. Marcus made a decision in that moment that would have shocked every board member who thought they knew him, every business associate who'd seen only his calculating strategic mind, every ex-wife who'd complained that he cared more about mergers than people. He told Jennifer that he lived right across the hall, that he was going to fix this, that she and her children were going to be safe, and he said it with such absolute certainty that Jennifer actually believed him even though she'd learned the hard way that promises from men were usually worthless. He spent the next 4 hours making phone calls despite the late hour, pulling favors and writing checks and using the influence he'd spent decades building, and by 6 a.m. a professional security company was installing a reinforced steel door with a top-of-the-line lock system, and by 8 a.m. a lawyer specializing in protective orders was meeting with Jennifer in Marcus's apartment because it had comfortable furniture and good coffee and felt safer than her own home, and by noon Jennifer had emergency custody documentation and a restraining order and a security system being installed with cameras and sensors and direct connection to the police department. Marcus barely noticed the money pouring out of his accounts because for the first time in years, maybe in his entire adult life, he felt like his resources were being used for something real, something that mattered more than market share and profit margins. But it wasn't just about money and connections, and that's what surprised Marcus most of all. Over the following weeks, he found himself knocking on Jennifer's door to check in, found himself playing with Sarah and making her laugh with terrible magic tricks he'd learned from a YouTube video, found himself holding baby Emma while Jennifer finally slept for more than 3 hours straight, found himself grocery shopping with an actual list instead of just grabbing protein bars and coffee, found himself cooking simple meals and sharing them with this small family who had somehow become woven into the fabric of his daily life. Jennifer was proud and independent, a nurse working double shifts to support her children after Derek had drained her savings and destroyed her credit, and she tried repeatedly to refuse Marcus's help, to insist she could handle everything herself, but Marcus understood pride because he'd worn it like armor for decades, and he knew how to respect it while still offering support. He hired Jennifer's best friend's teenage son to babysit, creating a job for a kid who needed it while giving Jennifer reliable childcare and the freedom to work without constant terror about her children's safety. He recommended Jennifer for a better-paying position at the hospital where Wellington Industries had connections, not pulling strings to get her hired but simply ensuring her application reached someone who would actually read it and see her impressive qualifications. He showed up on Saturday mornings with breakfast and asked if anything needed fixing, and slowly Jennifer's apartment transformed from a place of fear into a home. Fresh paint covering the holes Derek had punched in walls, new locks on windows, a small bookshelf Marcus assembled badly but enthusiastically for Sarah's growing collection of library books. The connection that grew between them was unexpected and genuine, built on 3 a.m. conversations when they both couldn't sleep, on shared exhaustion and hard-won hope, on Marcus learning what it meant to be present for people rather than just successful at business, on Jennifer remembering that not all men were threats and some were capable of showing up without expecting anything in return. Sarah called him Mr. Marcus and drew pictures of him with cape and superhero emblem, and baby Emma learned to reach for him with chubby hands, and Marcus discovered that being needed by these three people filled something in him that no acquisition or profit report ever had. It was Jennifer who asked him one evening why he lived in this modest building when his car and watch and obvious wealth suggested he could afford anywhere, and Marcus surprised himself by telling her the truth, that his marriage had ended because he'd been successful at everything except being present, that he'd achieved every goal and still felt empty, that he'd moved here hoping to find something real, and maybe without knowing it he'd been waiting for a little girl in princess pajamas to knock on his door at midnight and remind him what actually mattered. Derek violated the restraining order twice, and both times Marcus was there, and the second time the police arrested Derek with enough evidence and witness testimony to ensure serious charges, and Jennifer finally believed she might actually be safe. The trauma didn't disappear overnight, but slowly Sarah stopped checking the locks obsessively, and Emma stopped crying at sudden noises, and Jennifer stopped jumping every time someone knocked, and together they built something that looked remarkably like healing. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that we're all connected and that showing up for each other matters more than anything, please take a moment right now to hit that like button, leave a comment below telling us what this story meant to you, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that good people still exist in this world. 6 months after that midnight encounter, Marcus sat on Jennifer's couch holding sleeping Emma while Sarah showed him her spelling test. 100%, perfect score, every word correct. And Jennifer brought coffee from the kitchen, and it struck him that this small, ordinary moment was worth more than everything in his corner office, that these people had saved him just as much as he'd helped them, that sometimes the universe breaks our door exactly when the right person is walking down the hallway. Drop a comment right now if you believe in the power of showing up for each other, and tell us about someone who changed your life by simply being there when you needed them most. The little girl who'd asked a stranger to fix her broken door had actually been asking him to fix so much more, and somehow, together, they had, piece by piece, day by day, building safety and trust and something that looked beautifully like family, proving that sometimes the most important meetings don't happen in boardrooms but in broken doorways at midnight, when scared children find courage and successful men remember their humanity, and everyone involved discovers that the best version of life is the one where we show up for each other, again and again, whenever someone needs us most.